Okay, all right. Session number 4, membership matters. Talked about the beliefs of our church. We talked about the mission statement of our church and kind of how that plays out. Mike just gave a little about the history and who we are as Presbyterians. But when you think about the difference between a member versus an attender, for example, what are the expectations? What does membership actually entail, and why does it matter that you maybe cross the line in a sense of commitment to become members? And there may be a lot of different reasons why people become members, but I just want to kind of talk a little bit about what our thoughts and expectations are with regard to what a member is. The first couple statements are actually out of our book of order in your notes there. And the first one, for the mission of the congregation, let me just read that first paragraph together. The congregation is the church engaged in the mission of God in its particular context. The triune God gives the congregation all the gifts of the gospel necessary to being the church. The congregation is the basic form of the church, but it is not of itself a sufficient form of the church. Congregations are bound together in communions with one another, united in relationships of accountability and responsibility, contributing their strength to the benefit of the whole, and are called collectively the church. And then the second one really talks about the ministry of members. And I just want you to look at those bullet points, because in some ways this is in our minds the difference between a casual attender and a member. You just look at some of those bullet points that involvement from members includes proclaiming the good news in word and deed, taking part in the common life and worship of a congregation, lifting up one another in prayer, mutual concern, and active support, which once again assumes a depth of relationships that are being shared by people, studying scriptures and the issues of Christian faith and life, supporting the ministry of the church through the giving of money, time, and talents, that you realize, hey, this is not just an institution, this isn't just a building, we're together, and kind of like this is a family. And so I'm going to invest financially in what the family thinks is important, what we want to do together. Demonstrating a new quality of life, responding to God's activity in the world through service to others, living responsibly in personal, family, vocational, political, cultural, and social relationships. And then look at that last one, reviewing and evaluating regularly the integrity of one's membership. Isn't that interesting? That we take membership so seriously that there need to be times when we ask of ourselves as members to say, you know what, am I a faithful member? In other words, the pledge that I made as a member of this congregation, that I was going to be bought in, and I was going to be invested, and I was going to be committed to our community life, and I was going to give, and I was going to pray, and am I really living that out faithfully? And that's a good question. That's a question that's not asked by casual attenders. That's a question that's asked by bought-in members. So when you think about then practical membership at FPC, what are the values that we want to live out together as members and people who are invested here? First one is the value of worship. Obviously, our worship services are very important in the life of our congregation. There are unique opportunities for us to come together collectively and kind of arrange for a communal expression of God's work and value in our lives. And so we're very committed to that. We're very committed to a diversity of worship experiences. So how many, who of you attend Vine most often? Okay, what about the traditional service? Okay, so there you go. So, I mean, those are very different expressions of worship, but they're similar in terms of what's beneath the external, in a sense, is a commitment to the Bible, a commitment to worship being Jesus-centered and God-glorifying. And we're very committed to that. We value worship, and we value, as members, we want and expect that members think that attending worship is important. We don't take attendance records. We don't send the elders after you if you miss 2 or 3 weeks in a row. But at the same time, we would expect you would hold yourself accountable to say, I value worship. That's part of what being a member is I know for my own spiritual good and for the good of my community that making worship a priority is an important part of my membership commitment. So we value that. We want our members to value that. The value of witness to the community and to the world. We think that's an important part of our mission, and so we provide for opportunities around here locally, things like First Fridays, going out with Zach and the evangelism team and just shaking hands and being friendly to people at the booth and inviting them to church and letting them know what things are going on. We have a turkey distribution coming up here in November where we go and we try to help a local church in the Wabash community to just hand out free food and love on the people who live in their neighborhoods. And we make sure that we're behind the scenes. We want that local church that we're helping to be the heroes, not us. We just want to serve and help out. So that's a great, anybody can do that sort of a thing. There are global opportunities for mission. So we have mission trips, for example, every year to places like Haiti or Cuba, or we just commission a group to go to Merida, Mexico today in the classic service, or places like Africa. And so you can give, you can pray, and you can go on those trips. And I encourage you to do that. Thirdly, we value the mission, helping to make disciples. So participating in outreach events or being a welcoming voice on Sunday and at other events. We talked a bit about that, about showing up and not just thinking, what am I going to get out of this today, but thinking, who are the new people? Who are the people who feel lonely or disconnected? And how do I try to pay attention to that as I come on a Sunday morning or Wednesday night and help and welcome those people, or just shake a hand or extend a verbal welcome to those folks. That's a way you can help, as a community, help us make disciples. And obviously inviting friends and neighbors to FPC is an important part of what that might look like. Fourthly, we value the mission of engaging your own discipleship journey. So developing your own spiritual habits, reading and reflecting on the Bible, for example. We're almost 3/4 of the way through our God Story project, which was an attempt to say, hey, as a community, why don't we all commit to reading through the Bible in a year, but not necessarily reading every chapter, but reading the basic storyline of the Bible by reading 7 chapters a week. So that's something we've been very committed to, and it's been awesome to see the whole community be bought in and invested in reading the Bible. Prayer and solitude, personal worship, family worship, serving others. These are just practical, personal habits, spiritual habits that we think members ought to be committed to. And once again, this isn't about rules or discipline, or we're going to give you a guilt trip if you don't do this kind of stuff. That's not it at all. It's just saying, collectively, we want to encourage this in each other, because we know people who have these kind of spiritual habits in their lives tend to have more of a healthy spiritual life. And people who neglect these tend to drift pretty easily. So you probably know that to be true in your own life. So we try to encourage those. Investing in the community life of FPC families. So outside of Sunday morning worship attendance, we have Sunday school classes. We have family night courses on Wednesday night. We have small groups that meet here at church. We have small groups that meet in homes. We have some breakfast groups that are getting going. And then there are different things throughout the year, the men's and women's retreats, for example, or the women's fellowship dinner that's coming up, or just different things like that you can think where they're just places for you to kind of plug in and say, I want to be invested. I want to be a part of what's going on. Fifthly, we value stewardship. If you were in the classic service, well, actually it was in both, wasn't it? Elena was on the video screen. She did a great job talking about this idea of stewardship, that the Bible clearly teaches that God owns everything, and we're simply managers or stewards. And so we want to be faithful to steward over the money He gives us, resources He gives us, in a way that would honor Him. And so that's how we try to approach stewardship as a church. That's how we try to encourage you and your families to think about stewardship. Is, look, God's given us X amount of money to steward or manage for Him every year. And we want to prayerfully think about what portion of that do we want to invest in the life of our church. And so that's actually how we do it here. We have what's called a faith pledge every year, part of our God First Stewardship campaign that we do. And we basically just say, listen, here's what our session and our staff and our volunteers, they've gotten together and they've dreamed about the kind of ministries we think we can do next year. These are all the ways we can impact people's lives in the church, in the community, and around the world. And this is what that's going to cost. So this is what we'd like to do. But as a family, we've got to decide, can we do this? So why don't everybody pray about what they can give and just make a commitment, a faith pledge that just says that barring no unforeseen job change or loss of income, our family's going to commit to give X amount of dollars next year. And if we have the means to do that, we're committed to doing that. And then we pull all that together and say, okay, this is about what we have to work with, and let's adjust our budgets so we're responsible and trust that God's going to provide. And that's what we do. So that's in the front of your notebooks, actually, is the Faith Pledge card. And so if you move ahead and you want to be a member, that's one of the things we're going to ask you to think about that. Consider, we don't tell you how much, that sort of thing. And once again, we're not going to track you down if something changes and you can't follow through on that. But it is something we want you to prayerfully consider as a serious commitment. There's a lot of passages and Bible verses in here that kind of anchor that belief in giving and tithing and the support of the local church. That I'm not going to go over all of them, but they're there. Bottom line, and this is near the end of your notes. The bottom line. I love this quote by Elton Trueblood. He says, perhaps the greatest single weakness of the contemporary Christian church is that millions of supposed members are not really involved at all. And what is worse, do not think it strange that they are not. There's no real chance of victory in a campaign if 90% of the soldiers are untrained and uninvolved. That's exactly where we stand now. Most alleged Christians do not now understand the loyalty to Christ means sharing personally in His ministry, going or staying as the situation requires. And so we don't want that to be true here. We want membership to actually matter. We're not about numbers. We're not about, oh, we got 50 new members. We don't care about that stuff. But we do care about what membership means. And we want people who are bought in and invested and out of devotion to Christ take the local church seriously and want to see its mission thrive and move forward. And so that's what we're asking you to think about. Is not just for whatever other reasons you might be considering membership, we really want to challenge you to say, be committed, make this really matter. And we think there are a lot of benefits to that. When people cross that line of casual attendance to real bought-in membership, we think some really positive things come out of that. And I just listed a few of these. I don't want a lot of detail, but one, there's more opportunity to serve others. When you cross the line of commitment, it opens up some doors for you to be a part of something and not just be an observer, but be a participant. And we think that's important. Secondly, we think there's a deeper level of godly friendship. When you give yourself to others with this kind of accountability and commitment, it provides a strong foundation to build real relationships. Not just casual acquaintances, but real relationships that are bound by a common vision and a common goal. Right? We've all either been part of teams or watched movies where this is a big theme where, some ragtag group of people are brought together for some common purpose, and they may not even like each other at the beginning. Right? By the end of the movie, they love each other and there's this bond. Why? Because they gave themselves to something that was a common vision. And they knew that to get there, they had to work together. And that's to me, the benefit of crossing the line from casual attender to bought-in member is now you're part of something. And the relationships are going to grow deeper. And the lastly is just a more clearly defined sense of eternal purpose. Sorry, there's four. The third one, a more clearly defined sense of eternal purpose. And then the last one is inevitable spiritual growth. Because there's something universal about this radical, accelerated growth experienced by those who make a commitment and become accountable to that. Okay, well that's that. Let me just go over the last couple practical steps, kind of the takeaways from here. You've got this in your notes, the steps. There's basically 6 steps. One thing we want you to do is to write out your faith story. This is something we've begun doing the last 2 or 3 membership classes. And people are a little not sure about this at first. And just hang with me for a second. Basically what we'd like each person to do, and there's a little guide that's also in your notes. We're basically saying, tell us a little bit about how you've come to the place of relationship that you currently have with Jesus. And so a very simple thing we try to do to describe that is kind of before Jesus, how you came to know Jesus in the way you do, and what has life been like after, now that you've been walking with Jesus in the way that you have. Some of you will be like, well, I was kind of raised in the church and I don't really know much different, but I did come to a point where it became my faith, not my parents anymore. Okay, well, that's your story. That's great. How's life been like since you made that decision? Some of you are like, I didn't know anything about God, and I wasn't a Christian, and when I was 18 or 20, or I was 2 years ago, I came to faith, and it radically changed my life, and here's how it's different. So that's what we want you to do. We'd like you to put that to paper. Not because you're going to be graded. It's really for your benefit more than anything, but it will be fun for us to read and to hear your stories. And it can be a paragraph, and I would recommend it not be more than a page, because one of the practical benefits of doing this is that if somebody ever just says to you, hey Justin, I know you're a Christian, man, how did that even happen? Well, you're not going to right away you'll say, I've done this, man. I wrote 2 paragraphs. I know exactly kind of what I would say. Here's what my life was like before I came to know Jesus. Here's the details surrounding how I came to know him, and here's how my life's different. And you can share your story in a way that's not intimidating or whatever. So there's some tips on how to do that. But we want you to try to do that. Write out your personal faith story. Second thing is you would fill out the membership application and the new member questionnaire. Both of those are in your notebooks. Just take some time to do that. We encourage you to read the book, I'm a Church Member by Thom Rainer. It's a great book, kind of a primer introduction to what membership means, and it's really neat stuff in there. You've already signed up to meet with one of us. And if all that goes well and you still think it'd be great to be a member, and we have to chase you off at that point, then we would invite you to come, not on the date that I have in mind. Do we have a date there?
October 28th is the date, I think.
Okay, October 28th is when you would come, and it's on a Tuesday night. It's before a session meeting. It's a very informal dessert where we invite you to come in. There's dessert, coffee. It's about 20 to 30 minutes tops. And the session members want to meet you and get a chance to say hello at least. And it's also during that time that Mike is going to ask you your membership vows. So there are a handful of vows. Those are in your notebook of what you're committing. You're basically committing that you're saved, that you submit your life to the Lordship of Christ, and that you want to commit to living out a life of membership in the way that we've described it together. So those questions will be asked during the membership, during that introductory thing with session on the 28th. And then that following Sunday, whether in Vine or in classic services, you would be mentioned and welcomed by the congregation. Clear as mud? Appreciate you doing this. Let me say a closing prayer. Lord, we love you and we thank you for your gift of salvation to us. We don't take it lightly that you gave what was most precious to you, your Son Jesus, so that we might have forgiveness and grace extended to us. And not just that, but that we would have the chance to be recreated, to be like you, that over time, that you're committed by the work of your Spirit to working in us and through us and improving our walk with you and helping us to be who we were created to be. So I thank you for that. Thank you for our church. Thank you that membership does matter here. Thank you for these folks who are considering whether membership would be the right step for them. I pray you give them very clarity about that and confidence in whatever decision they make. And thank you for their time again today, and I ask you just encourage them in their walk with you in Jesus' name. Amen.